So everyone is clear with the internal tables, what we discussed yesterday. Did you get a chance to create or use internal tables in your programs? No response. Okay. So today we'll try to understand select options. There are two types of input fields that you can create on the selection screen. One is parameters, a single input field. The other is select options, where the user can give a range of values at once. So we'll try to understand that today. Select options. So you already know parameters. If you want to take a single input as a value, so far whatever programs you have created, be it the billing document assignment or the material and plant assignment which we are trying in the class, we are taking a single value from the user. He's either giving you one material number to process or one billing document to process, right? So sometimes the user says, instead of executing the program for each document or each material number, I want to execute it for a range of values. So I want to run this program for 10 materials or 10 documents at once. So in such case, we need to provide him an option where he can give the range of values at once. So we can do that by using this select options keyword. Okay. So I'll use the same requirement. To define a parameters field, you say parameters pmatnar type matnar. This is how you define your parameters field, right? So this parameter keyword is doing two things. One is it is defining a variable in your program by name pmatnar. It's working like a data keyword, and also it's creating one input field on the screen with the same name pmatnar. And since the memory and the screen field share the same name, it is linking these two. So whatever I input on the screen is stored in this memory pmatnar. But with select options, it does not define a memory on its own. What it does is it creates a range for an existing memory. Okay, so if I use select options, the keyword is select options, and we say s underscore for select options or so underscore, anything you can use. I cannot say s underscore matnar type matnar because this actually does not define a new memory in a program. What select options will do is it will create a range for existing memory. Okay, so to define select options, you need to say select options, your name, and then you say for and give an existing memory reference for which you want to create a range. So either I can say, for example, if I want to create a select options for material number, range for material number, I can say data vmatnar type matnar. I can first define the memory vmatnar, which is of type matnar, and then I can say smatnar for vmatnar. So you need to give an existing data object reference for in your select options. So this is how you define your select options. You say select options, the select options name, say for, and give the reference to an existing memory. So here I can either define one variable vmatner and refer it to that, or in fact we don't need to define it separately. My WMAKT structure has this material number anyway, right? So I can say for WMAKT matner. So I can also do this. All I need to do is refer my select options field to a existing variable. So either you define one variable and then refer it to that, or if you already have a variable in your program, simply refer your select options to that variable. So in this case, my WMAKT structure anyway has this material number, so I'm referring it to this SMATNR. Okay. Let's see how the output looks, how the selection screen looks. I'll also define a parameters to show you the difference. So here I've defined this parameters and select options. PMATNR, I've defined it using a parameters, so it's a single input field, whereas SMATNR, I've defined it using select options, so it gives me a range. Okay, here in PMATNR I can only input one value, whereas in SMATNR I can do a lot of things. I can build a very complex selection criteria. Okay, for example, I can give a range from 100 to 2000. So it will process all the materials between 100 to 2000. So you can give a range, or you can actually click on this button here, multiple selection, and you can give single values. For example, I want to process material number 100, 200, 300. I want to process these three materials, and you can also select the operator. If you click on this, you can select greater than, less than, not equal to, all these things you can do. So I can say, if I say greater than 200, then it will process all the materials which are greater than 200. So you can give single values. You can give a range of values like this. For example, I can say all the materials between 500 to 800. So it will consider all the materials between 500 to 800. So I gave single values. I said process material number 200, 300, and all the materials between 500 to 800. And you can also exclude certain values. For example, I'm asking the system to process the materials between 500 to 800, but out of that I want to exclude material number 600. So in this exclude tab, if I specify 600, then it will consider all the materials between 500 to 800 except material 600. Okay, so you can give single values for excluding, and also you can give a range of values for excluding. So I can say all the materials between 650 to 700. So it will process the materials between 500 to 800, but it will exclude material number 600 as well as material number from 650 to 700. So these materials will be excluded from the selection. So you can actually build a very complex selection criteria with your select options. Whereas with parameters, the user is limited to entering only a single value. But with select options, you have more options. You can give a very complex selection criteria. So this is how you define a select options. You say select options, the select options name, and then say for and give a existing data object reference so that it creates a range for this material for that field. So parameters, whatever you define using parameters is like a variable, right? It occupies some is pmatnar in my program is a variable. So what could this smatnar be? Is it a variable or is it a work area? What it could be? Anyone? What do you think smatnar could be? Is it a variable, a single input field, or a work area? Vijeta?
It cannot be a work area because work area can hold only one value at a time.
So what it could
So
be?
in a box we have only internal tables with standard tables which can hold more than one values. So
Yes.
my guess is
So since you are actually trying to give input lot of stuff, so it has to store all this information. So it has to be an internal table because only internal table can store more than one line. So smatnar that you are defining in the program is an internal table. So it where whatever you create using select options, it creates an internal table. We call it a range table. Okay. If you want to see this in I just write this to keep a breakpoint. Again, I've entered all that selection criteria, and when I run it again, I lost all that. Right? I need to again click on this and build my criteria. Whenever you develop a report, if the user is running your report, most cases they'll be running this report for the same selection criteria. He would be if for example if this report is giving some information based on the material numbers, vendor numbers, customer numbers he'll input on the screen, then he'll be running this report for the same criteria in most cases. So if every day if he's running this report, the selection criteria would remain the same. But if he's giving such complex criteria, he's giving a lot of information as a selection criteria, and let's say you have 10 fields on the screen. For example, if I open this transaction, here if you see, there are more than one field on the selection screen. If I have to give such criteria for all the fields, then I have to spend good 20-30 minutes in just giving my selection criteria every time I run this report, right? So if your selection criteria is the same every time you run this report, instead of spending time in building your selection criteria, what you can do is you can maintain the criteria. For example, I can say 100, 100, 100, 200, range of values from 23 to 80, exclude 100, let's say 60, okay, and whatever you want to give, you can give. So if my selection criteria is the same, so here I'll give, let's say 100 as the material. I'll fill all the fields with my selection criteria. Then you can click on this save button. So you can save this selection as a variant. So when you click on this save, give some name for your variant. Let's say test. Click on this copy screen assignment and click save. So I've saved this as a variant test. You can see one extra application toolbar button is created. The next time I run this report, I don't need to manually input all the stuff. I can simply click on this button, get variant. So the variant I've created is available here. So double click on this and my selection criteria is filled automatically. So I have this, whatever I've entered earlier is available. Okay. So this saves time. And if you want to run your programs in the background, you want to run this report every Sunday 2 p.m., then obviously you don't need to be in front of the system to execute it and fill the selection criteria, right? And you cannot schedule this in the background because the program cannot run without giving the selection criteria. So somebody has to input the selection criteria for the program to run. So in such cases, what we do is we create one variant and we schedule the background job. So you'll give the program name that needs to be run at that time, and also you'll give the variant name which should be used when this program runs. So it picks up the selection criteria from the variant. So these are the different uses of your variants. So the select options is storing more than one value. So it is an internal table. So if you see SMATNAR, whatever I entered, the selection criteria is stored in this table, SMATNAR. So it's a range table. The structure of the range table is it has 4 fields: sign, option, low, and high. Sign will tell the system whether to include a certain value or exclude it. So it will have either E or I based on what you wanted to do. If you wanted to include the value and if you have specified them in under include tab, it will have I, and if you have specified the value under exclude tab, its sign will be E. So sign will tell the system whether to include a certain value or exclude it. Option will have the operator equal to, between, greater than, less than, all these things. And low will have the low value you input, and high will have the high value input. Okay. So the structure of this range table is fixed. It has 4 fields: sign, option, low, high. The length of this low and high field depends on the data object reference you have given. Since I said for MATNAR, this low and high fields are character 18. If I say, if I define one more select options, for example, select options, sorry, s underscore spras for, now this spras is a character 2 field. So you can see it is 2 characters in length. So SMATNAR low and high fields are character 18, whereas for spras it will be character 2. Let me input something. So here the length of low and high fields is character 2. So based on the data object reference you give while defining your select option, the system picks up the length of this low and high fields from that data object. Okay. Otherwise the structure is fixed. It has 4 fields always: sign, option, low, high. So how do we use these select options? The user is giving you such criteria. So how do you compare that in your select statement, for example? If you have to compare select, let's say, star from MAKT into table ITMAKT, where MATNAR equals, if I want to compare these parameters, then I'll say where MATNAR equals to PMATNAR, right? So this is how we compare the input given by the user in our select statement. Then how do I compare the select options? Do we need to loop this SMATNAR and then compare every record to get that value? There should be a simpler way, right? So to compare the select options, or basically this range structures, whichever has the sign option low high, you can use the in operator. I can say where matnar in S matnar. I don't need to manually compare anything. Whatever the criteria the user gives, all I can say is in S matnar, and the system will automatically consider whatever has to be included will be included, whatever has to be excluded will be excluded. I don't need to worry about it. Here if you see my internal table, now when I execute this select statement, the system will automatically consider whatever values I asked it to consider. So it's getting me data from 100, 100, material 100, 200, and it will exclude whatever I was asked it to exclude. So I don't need to worry about it. All I can say is say in SMATNAR, and the system will take care of including the values and excluding the values based on the selection criteria. So it's that simple. Okay. So if the user asks for a range, instead of running the program for every material, he says, give me a range so that I can run it for multiple materials at once. Then you can go with select options. That's how you define it, select options. And if you want to use it in your program to compare in your select statement, you can simply use the in operator on this range table, select options. Any questions? Ravi? Whatever range you give, it will consider. If you give range as 100, 200, and then another range as 250 to 350, then it will consider everything between 100 to 200, and then between 250 to 350. So these select options, if you see, when I say SMATNAR, it is showing me the work area. It's a structure. To see the internal table, I'm giving this square brackets. So why am I doing that? Prashant, you have a question?
Yeah, so in the selection screen, we are giving S matner, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how does system validate whether we are giving the correct material number or not? Because I can give something like,
It doesn't validate anything. You need to handle it in your program.
So we have to handle it within the program. Okay. How do we do that?
Just select the data from the master table. If Saisabasi fails, throw an error.
Okay, but here we cannot put anything like drop-down validation, etc.
You can also do that. You can create a list box if you want. If the same thing, if you want to show some value in pmatnar, if you want to show a default value in pmatnar, by the time I show the selection screen, what can I do?
Right.
If I fill the pmatnar in my program, it shows it on the screen, default value.
Right.
Same way, if you fill smatnar, that values will be shown here. So if you want to pre-populate some values, then fill it in your program itself, smatnar, and by the time the user sees the selection screen, he'll see those values. Okay, but validating a single input field is different from validating a select options. With a single input field, you write a select to Mara, for example, in this case, material number, and if Saisabasi fails, you throw an error saying that the input is invalid. But for select options, again you write a select to Mara, and even if you could find one material valid from all the range he has given, you proceed. If you don't find even a single material valid, then only you throw a message. You don't validate every material the user inputs. So if he's giving you a range of 10 to 100 or 100 to 200, Then if you can find at least one material valid between this range, then you proceed with your program. You don't validate if 100 is correct or 101 is correct or 102 is correct. You don't do it that way. So simply validate for the range that he has given. If you could not find any material between that range, throw an error saying that give a valid criteria. If you could find at least one material between that range, then you proceed.
So basically we have to raise that exception as soon as we define the selection option, right?
No.
In the program?
Once he gives the criteria and clicks on execute, then you validate,
Okay.
and then throw an error message.
Okay.
So you'll come to know that how to show messages, how to validate later.
Okay, no worries, thanks.
So again, there's something called check table concept. So for example, if I have this brass, so there are different ways you can validate. So either you can handle it in the program, or if this field has a check table assigned, it automatically validates. Okay, or else I can handle it in my program also. So whatever you're defining using select options is creating an internal table, and it is an internal table with header line. Yesterday we've discussed about internal tables. In that we are creating the internal table and we are defining a work area separately. Here if you see, I'm saying IT MAKT type standard table of MAKT. So it just creates the internal table body. To process the data in this internal table, I'm defining a separate memory WA as a work area to work with this internal table, right? If you want to see this, for example, this is the internal table body we have defined, right? So my table has multiple rows. So to work with the data in this internal table, I'm defining a separate memory, a work area, and then using that memory to process one record at a time. So I'll be bringing one record at a time to this work area, and then I'll be processing. So this is explicit work area you are defining to work with your internal table. You can also define internal tables with header line, wherein you can use this header line as the work area. Instead of defining a separate work area, you can actually define an internal table with header line and use the header line itself as a work area. So when I define an internal table with header line, it simply attaches one header line to this table. This header line also has the same name as my internal table body, and I can use this header line as the work area. So I can bring one record at a time to this header line and then process that. So either you can define an explicit work area, a separate memory altogether to work with this internal table, or you can also define the internal table with header line and use the header line as the work area. Okay, but this internal tables with header lines is obsolete. So we always work with separate memory. We always we always define an explicit work area instead of an implicit work area. So if you want to define internal tables with header line, there are different ways you can do it. For example, here if I say with header line, then it creates an internal table with header line. Okay, and my internal table body and the header line share the same name. For example, earlier to loop the data, to process the data in this internal table, I was saying loop at ITMAKT into WMAKT. So I'm looping the records from the internal table to the work area, a separate memory. If I'm using internal table with header line, you can say loop at itmakt into itmakt. So here it will loop from the body of the table itmakt to the header line of the table itmakt. Both share the same name. You don't need to do this. You can say loop at itmakt and the system will understand that you want to loop from the body to header line. Okay. So if you have an internal table with header line, you can simply say loop at itmakt and it will loop from body to header line, one record at a time. And if since my header line and the body share the same name, how do you differentiate between the body and the header line? For example, if I want to clear the work area, if I say clear itmakt, now it should clear the header line or the body, what it should clear. So if you simply give the name of the table, then you are referring to the header line. If you want to refer to the body of the table, then you say, you use the square brackets. If I say clear itmakt and give the square brackets, then I'm referring to the body of the table. Okay. For example, let's say read table itmakt index. Since I'm using header line, I don't need to say into and give the work area. I can simply say read table itmakt index 2. So I'm just writing it to clear. Now if you see, if I see this itmakt, now I have defined this internal table with header line. So the first line that you see is the header line. When I select the data is selected into the body of the table and one header line is attached to this body, right? When I say read table itmakt index 2, then it will read the second line of this internal table to the header line. So I'm basically using this header line as the work area. So the second line is copied to the header line, right? And when I say clear itmakt, it simply clears the header line, because if you simply give the name, you are referring to the header line. But if I say clear itmakt with square brackets, then I'm referring to the body of the table. So it clears the body of the table. Okay. So instead of working with a separate memory, defining a work area as a separate memory, if I'm saying with header line, then it creates that work area or it attaches that work area as a header line to the table, and I can use this header line as the work area. Any questions on this? So, but the concept, header lines concept is obsolete. We no more define internal tables with header lines. We always use an explicit work area. Okay. And in object-oriented programming, it's not supported. Internal tables with header lines is not supported in OOPS. Yogita? Yogita, you have a question? Vijita?
Yeah, why this concept of header line is not carried to OOPS, and why is it obsolete?
SAP recommends working with explicit memories rather than implicit memories. So when you process some data, it's always good to work with an explicit memory than implicit memories. So a lot of things were deprecated. For example, I can, when I write a select statement, for example, I'm defining one work area separately and I'm saying type MAKT, right? This creates one line, one work area in my program, one structure. So I'm saying select single star from MAKT into WAMAKT. So I'm explicitly specifying where this data has to be selected, right? Into MAKT where matnar equals to pmatnar. Okay. This is
Yeah.
explicitly specifying what you want to do, where you want to select the data into the memory. Can I write a select statement like this? Select star from MAKT where matnar equals to pmatnar. Can I write it this way?
No.
Why? You're not telling the system where to select that data, right?
Right.
I can use this tables keyword. If I say tables MAKT, this also creates one work area with the name
Okay.
MAKT, and it also has all the fields of this MAKT. It's as good as the structure of this MAKT work area defined using tables keyword is same as WMAKT. It has all the fields of MAKT. Now when I say select single star from MAKT where matnar equals pmatnar, the system will automatically select the data into this MAKT structure which I've defined. So it's an implicit memory. So it's understood that I'm asking it to select it to this MAKT. But by that, the system has to actually first compare your variables which fits this criteria and then bring the data to that variable, right? Because you're not explicitly specifying where to select the data. You're making the system to decide where to store that data, right?
Okay.
So that's the implicit memories.
So I have a question now. What I'm seeing is like for each thing we do, we have so many options. Like we have tables, or we can create a work area, or we have with header line option. So the code which would be running right now will have lots of things. There will be some code which is written with header lines, and then they would have done new enhancements with tables keyword. So when we start working there, then I mean there could be so many things which we won't know. So how do we handle such things? Just F1 help every time we don't see which we know?
No,
Is it
there
sufficient
could be
help?
more than one way of doing something, but there's only one best way of doing it. So even this tables is obsolete. We no more use tables. It's old programming. So we always
Okay.
work with a separate memory. So in this class, I'll be focusing only on the best way of doing it. You need to know other ways just because you might bump into a program which was developed some 10 years back, and at that time they used all this. So when you look at that code, you also need to understand what is this tables, what is this header lines, right? But when you develop a new program, you always use the uh, most efficient way of doing things. So whatever I'm teaching you in this class is the best way of doing something. Other things I'm teaching you just because you need to know, just in case you see some old programs. So that's why those things you understand with experience. Once you spend more time, you automatically understand. When you look at other programs, when you look at other code, you will understand, okay, this other way of doing it. But wherever possible in F1 documentation, SAP specifies that it's obsolete if something is obsolete. So you also understand by that. Okay.
Yes.
So, again, as I said, there are so many ways. Even to define these internal tables, I can define it in another way. If you try to learn every possible way of doing something, you'll only get confused. So my focus would be to learn something the most efficient way, and then later on, once you're more comfortable, you can always explore the other ways of doing the same stuff. Okay. So the select options creates an internal table with header line. Okay. So Ravi, what do you want me to repeat in this header line? When you say with header line, all the system does is to the internal table body it attaches one